back to another powerful episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host, Avik, and today we are stepping into one of the most rapidly changing frontiers in the mental health, the intersection of therapy and technology. Yeah. So let's be honest, dear listeners. The wellness app marketplace feels endless, like meditation apps, AI therapy bots, mental health startups, like promising instant solutions. Some are truly transformative, while others raise a big questions about the ethics, accessibility, and whether they actually help. So, how do we, as the consumers, sort through the noise? How do we ensure that tech supports mental health or mental health care rather than cheapening or replacing it? Yeah. So, to explore this, I'm joined by someone who's not afraid to say out loud what many in the mental health field are quietly thinking. So, please welcome my guest, Daniel Flashner. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. So, dear listeners, like before we start, I'll quickly love to introduce you with Daniel. So, Daniel is a licensed professional counselor, AAACCT certified sex therapist, and the founder of Inflection Point Therapy. So, he works at the intersection of sex therapy, trauma informed care, and health system in reform. And also, he brings both the clinical wisdom and system level insight to the conversation. So he has spoken for the organizations like Davis Finney Foundation, consulted for startups, and has a knack for keeping conversations candid, compassionate, and refreshingly real. So I'll not take much of your time, dear listeners. And today we are diving into the tech, therapy, and what it means to find intentional tools for real healing. So welcome to the show again, Daniel.
All right. Yeah, I'm really excited to get into this. I think it's a really interesting topic.
Yeah, exactly. So Daniel, like that tech therapy space is like exploding right now. Like you
Mhm.
have AI-driven chatbots, platforms connecting the clients to therapists. So from your perspective, what excites you the most about these innovations?
For me, the two big things that we want to improve upon are access to therapy. That's been a big issue for a while. Being in the US, I come from a little bit of a American lens on this, but I think this is something that is an issue much more broadly than that, just in different forms. And then the other one is improving outcomes. For me, I'm a big proponent of therapy, of course. It's a big part of the reason why I'm in this field and why I do the work I do. But at the same time, I actually do think there's a lot of room for it to grow. If you look at some of the effect sizes of uh, therapy intervention, especially in just the more traditional way when we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic therapy, things like that, there's a real effect there, but we're not talking about 98% of the people improving. It's a much smaller effect size than that. And so to me, that says there's room to grow. And my hope is that, tech, among other things, can be uh, where we can see some of this improvement.
Exactly. Exactly true. Yeah. So like and on the flip side, what red flags do you see in how some of these tools are being marketed or used?
hmm Well, a lot of that comes down to the intentions of the people who are running it and where they stand ethically on some of this tech. And we can run into a couple problems there. One of them can just be people who are really just in this for the money. They see behavioral health is kind of a big thing right now. Everyone's talking about how, it's not embarrassing to get help. And I agree with that completely. But some people, I think, see this as an opportunity and say, we have a huge consumer base here, and we just want to take advantage of that to create something either through AI or otherwise that's going to make me a lot of money. And so that's one potential issue. And then the other one is people who genuinely are well intentioned, but just don't have the clinical lens to figure out exactly what's needed. And so I think there really are some people who can say, hey, I really want to help people. I really want to have, mental health improve throughout the world. and yet they don't really know what responsible therapy looks like. A lot of the research that's available to people is relatively simplistic. And so they create something that they think is good, but it has issues either with data privacy or with how they manage risk, or it's limited and doesn't help a lot of people with severe trauma and things of that nature, despite being marketed as something that could do that.
Yeah. Mhm, mhm. Yeah. So, yeah, I really love that because you frame both the opportunity and caution here. So, yeah, definitely. And uh, so you have also said before that the therapy itself is often inaccessible and expensive. So,
Mhm.
uh, do you see that the tech as helping solve that problem, or is it just shifting the costs and frustrations like in new directions?
It's an interesting question. The answer is both kind of. Theoretically, this could help increase access to therapy. I think even setting aside the bots for a second, things as simple as doing teletherapy rather than in-person therapy, which really exploded when COVID hit, can help people in more rural communities that don't have as many therapists around them get access to care. And so that's a pretty rudimentary example of how tech can help with therapy. But I also get concerned when we look at things like the chatbots or things like that, where they say, well, now people that couldn't access therapy can access it, because it should the answer really be, well, you can't find a human therapist. So here's a chatbot, rather than looking at the system itself and saying, wait a minute, why don't these people have access to a human therapist, and how can we help them get that?
Yes, true, exactly. And if someone is considering an app or online therapy platform, what's the smartest way they can evaluate whether it actually serves their needs?
Well, I think it depends a little bit on what their needs are, but the big thing they want to look for is to try to be really honest about what they're trying to get out of this and to figure out if that's something that a chatbot can do. And when we talk about that, I think we want to talk about some more tangible problem solving type solutions from the chatbots. If you're thinking, well, I have this big decision to make, I don't necessarily know how to conceptualize it. That's something that I think a chatbot could be pretty helpful for. It can help you talk through it. There are some very concrete tools that I think it could use to give you a good way of thinking about it and making some of those choices. Where I run into concerns is if we talk about either complex trauma or um, some sort of like regret or grief that a human connection is really needed. That's where I would really recommend people try to find a human to talk to, preferably a trained professional. And, since that is often only once a week or once every couple weeks, depending on accessibility, if you want to use a chatbot or something like that as an adjunct to that and to support that, I think that's a more useful application for it.
Understood. Yeah. Uh, and that's such a critical lens because accessibility isn't just about affordability. It's all about like trust, evidence, and whether the tool honors the humanity of the person using it. So,
Mhm.
and on the other side, like, I mean, it might sound contradictory, but it's actually not. Like,
Yeah.
some people worry that the tech is trying to replace therapists with the
Mhm.
algorithms, while others argue that the shortage of providers like means uh, provider means that we need these tools. So, where do you land on that debate?
Yeah, I think that we need to find a perspective in which tech and therapists can work together on this. You're totally right that there are some companies out there who are thinking we're just going to be the solution to behavioral health, and we don't necessarily want to play ball with the therapist. The famous one, or not famous one, the recent example is Slingshot AI released this bot called Ash. It was, they did a big marketing push and they're basically saying this is an AI therapist. But the thing that struck me was the LinkedIn posts and a lot of the social media type stuff they had going on said, they told us we couldn't do this. They told us we shouldn't do this. We did this anyway. Our therapist is here, or our AI therapist is here. I'm like, come use it. This is your tool. And to me, that seemed weirdly adversarial to the behavioral health community. I think that that was an interesting strategy in that it was very provocative, but I wonder how it could have been different if they said, "Hey, are you having trouble connecting with a therapist?" Or, "Is it tough to only see your therapist once a week and you want a little bit more support?" That's maybe not what a marketer would tell you to say, but from an ethical therapy perspective, I think that could have been a really interesting way to introduce this. And then you contrast that with some of the we'll say like smaller startups out there who don't necessarily have some of the VC funding and all that, who really are saying, we're not trying to be the one stop shop solution here, but here's something that either you could use, or even we're going to market this to therapists as a tool to work with them and their clients. And so my perspective is that we need to figure out a way for therapists to find tech that works for them and that works for their clients and that we can use to make outcome and accessibility better rather than getting into some strange turf war over the therapy field.
Mm. So, if you could design the ideal partnership between tech and human therapists, what would it look like?
It's a good question. I don't know if I have a perfect answer to it, but off the top of my head, I would love to have, some sort of, we'll just use like a hypothetical startup that has people in leadership and C-suite type positions where you have some clinicians on there. You also have some tech people and some business minded people, but where therapists genuinely have a seat at the table, almost as a bridge between what therapy is and what the business and tech side of this is, because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in this discussion, where there are a lot of really well-intentioned people out there who just don't have the training to say exactly what therapy, either from a bot or what technology could do to help therapy. And so if you can get some of those voices at a table and then of course give them reasonable compensation or equity or something like that, then all of a sudden you have those inroads between some of the people who are more tech focused and some of the therapists. As for what the product would be, I think it's hard to say, but you know traditionally we'll talk a lot about, hey, maybe this client should go journal, or maybe they should do all these things in between sessions. So if there were some way to use technology to either hold people accountable or to support them in some of the quote unquote therapy homework in between sessions, then I think there is a lot of space for tools like that to connect therapy to the digital age and everything that's coming out.
Mhm. Got it. Yeah. And also, like your practice is called the inflection point therapy.
Mhm.
Uh, if you zoom out, like, do you think the entire mental health field is at its own inflection point with the tech?
Absolutely. I think this is a really important moment for the mental health field because we can either dig our heads in the sand and say, this is how therapy's done, and I don't want to change. In which case, I honestly think people could get a little bit run over by some of these startups that are trying to take things over. Or we could say, you know what, we're trying our best, doing some good work here, but maybe we can be better. And maybe we can have the humility to say that we're not perfect therapists and that things can help us. And we can try to have a seat at the table so that some of the things we do see as more dangerous, don't necessarily gain as much of a foothold, and we can be a part of this selection process. But yeah, I absolutely think this is a major inflection point in where mental health is going.
Exactly. Ooh. And for the listeners, whether they are therapists, clients, or just curious, what's the one intentional step they can take to navigate this space with more clarity and confidence?
It's a great question. One thing I would say for everybody is to manage your expectations both in a positive and a more cautious way about what can happen in therapy and what you're trying to accomplish. I think a lot of times people see therapy as either a magic bullet that is going to solve all their problems, or on the flip side, you know, this is complete baloney and therapy doesn't actually do anything, when the truth is way closer to the middle. And therapy is a tool that you can use to try to better yourself, to try to make improvements in your life, to try to heal from some of your trauma. But a lot of times, I see people saying, "Oh, well, you have all these things going on, just go to therapy." And you should go to therapy, but you're still gonna struggle at times. You're still gonna uh, have to do the hard work. And so, just having that honest conversation, hopefully with a clinician about like what might this process look like, what can I expect to get out of this, and then how can I be accepting of the limitations of it, I think would be really helpful for people.
Amazing. Lovely. Daniel, thank you so much for bringing such honesty and nuance to this conversation. And what I appreciate most is like how you have reminded us that while tech may evolve quickly, but true healing still requires intention, humanity, and relationship.
Yeah, I love how you put that.
Yeah, yeah. And for all the listeners, like maybe your takeaway today is this: technology isn't inherently good or bad, but it's a tool. So the
Hmm.
real question is how we use it and whether we let it deepen our humanity or distract us from it. So that's a very valid thing. Yeah. If today's episode resonated with you, dear listeners, go learn more about Daniel Fleshner and his work at Inflection Point Therapy, and check out more out of his talks on sexual health, trauma, and reimagining mental health systems. And Daniel, if someone wants to connect with you, what would be the great medium?
I think the best way to find me would be on my Substack, which is called The Disrupted Therapist. I just create a lot of content around, really, for the most part, the stuff that we've been talking about today. And, I really encourage people to reach out to me there. You can also go to inflectionpointtherapy.com, and there's a contact form on there that'll come directly to me. And, I'm always happy to have some of these conversations with people, or to hear any perspectives people may have.
Amazing. Great. The listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links into the show notes for easy reference. And until next time, stay intentional with the tools that you use and keep questioning what truly supports your well being. And remember that a healthy mind and a healthy life start with the choices that honor your whole self. So, thank you so much.